Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Sawa Sawa Weekly Forum, a program elevating discourse and amplifying the voices of South Sudanese on issues relevant to peace building and community building. My name is Samuel Garang, your host for today's forum. Our topic of discussion is the dredging of the Nile River. As most of you might be aware, 2 weeks ago, the Egyptian government delivered to Unity State some machines for the dredging of the Nile River, which is one of the major tributaries of the Nile River. This has inspired mixed reactions and sparked debates in the country and in the diaspora. To explore some of the most critical questions concerning this controversial project, the Weekly Forum has convened a panel of experts. So here with us today is Nhial Tiitmamer, who is an environmental specialist and senior associate at the UNHCR. He's currently on leave from the Sud Institute, where he's the director of Environment and Natural Resources Program. His comments do not reflect the views of the organizations he's associated with, including the UNHCR. Also joining us is Abraham Awolich, who is the co-founder of the People's Coalition for Civil Action. He's also the co-founder and former managing director of the Sud Institute. Awolich and Nhial, welcome to the weekly Sawa Sawa Weekly Forum.
Thank you very much.
To get us started, I know this topic is highly technical. So can you both explain to us in layman's terms what is actually dredging and what is the objective of the proposed NAM dredging project?
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Samuel Graham, for inviting me to be part of this important discussion. It is timely because the social media has been awash with, discussion on the same, and it's important that we discuss this. First, what is dredging and what is the objective? So let me just go with the first question, which is what is dredging? Dredging is used for many purposes. It's used to maintain the rivers so that rivers are navigable. For example, if the river is blocked by vegetation, dredging is used to clear the vegetation. If there is siltation, for example, it can be used to remove the silt to bring back the river to the original depth or the original width or the original channel. So this is basically the purpose of it. And from an environmental standpoint, dredging is not supposed to be carried out before a feasibility study and before environmental and social impact assessment. And the reason is dredging is associated with drastic environmental impacts. It can cause flooding downstream. For example, to widen the channel, it means more water going downstream at a faster rate. That will overwhelm the existing channel downstream, and it can cause more flooding. Or it can also cause reduction of water upstream because more water going faster than normal would mean reduction at the river level, at the wetlands level. And so it depends on how you use it. It depends on the kind of problem that you want to solve with it. So if you want to remove the vegetation that is floating on the water, you can do it. But then if you were to remove the vegetation floating also, it also has implications also, because you will have to determine where you want to put the vegetation that you are removing, because it will also have impact also. And the way you do it, because also can cause pollution, the machinery that you are using, and so on and so forth. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nhial Awolich.
Well, thank you. Yeah, definitely. Niall has mentioned the main issues or the main purposes of dredging. The only thing I can add is that dredging is sometimes done to improve navigation of the rivers. So if there is a particular channel that you have heavy boats traveling in or transporting material and it's getting shallow, you can dredge it so that it is able to pass and navigate very easily. Or you can also do that at an harbor where you, the port, you can dredge that so that you can dig it a little bit deeper. What is not done normally with dredging is it's not a good flood control mechanism. It doesn't control floods. There is not much history of dredging rivers as a method of controlling floods. Thank you very much.
Yeah, following up on this issue that you have just raised about the connection between dredging and the flooding, it appears it's actually that the proponents of the project are advancing dredging as a solution to flooding in the country. And so it's always important to really understand the root causes of a problem in order to be able to come up with sustainable solutions to that problem. So I want to ask both of you like a three-part question, which is extreme flooding in most parts of South Sudan due to the blockage of the Nile River, which is now being attempted to be dredged? And two, if it's not really the cause of the flooding, what are some other root causes of the current flooding in the extreme flooding in the country? And which is you partly just mentioned, is dredging an effective flood risk reduction mechanism?
Yeah, I'll go ahead. You start.
Okay. Of course, is dredging an effective, or the first question is the root cause, or the main, or is it because the river is blocking of the NAM or the cause of extreme flooding? So we'll begin with that question, right?
Yes.
Well, at the moment, we really don't know how shallow the rivers are now and the extent to which the siltation of the rivers has led to the current flooding condition in South Sudan. What we know, or what I know, is that the last 3 years have been completely different in the history of flooding in South Sudan. The kind of water that we received in 2019 has never been received in living memory. Because in 2019, what happened is that the warming phase of the Indian Ocean dipole, was basically exacerbated by the warming condition of the globe, especially the global warming. And maybe let me, if it is possible, to share my
screen. Yes.
Share the screen here.
Yeah, that would be good.
That would be great. Yeah.
I was trying to explain that what is causing this flooding. Perhaps it has been exacerbated by other factors, but the main factor driving this is climate change, and of course the normal climate variability. So these are the main factors: the climate variability, and what is that? is the fluctuation of climate situation. Every year could be flooding. The next year it may be normal, and so we always receive flooding in South Sudan. It's something that is normal, but these normal flooding and drought, they have been exacerbated by extreme temperatures, and the Indian Ocean is one of the fastest warming oceans around the world. And much of the rainfalls in East Africa, they originate from the Indian Ocean. The evaporation from the Indian Ocean is deposited as rainfall in East Africa. And so let us go to the next slide so that I can show how in 2019 we received in East Africa the highest amount of rainfall and the water accumulating in the lakes, coming downstream in South Sudan. And so you can see here in 2019 October with the graph, that graph on your left-hand side of the screen. That is the normal fluctuation of the sea surface temperatures of the Indian Ocean. But because of the warming, the global warming, so the warming phase of what is called the Indian Ocean dipole, which is like El Nino, it fluctuates from warming to normal to cold. And during the warming phase of this Indian Ocean dipole, we usually receive a lot of rainfall in normal years. And it's a good news for farmers and for everybody. But because of the global warming, this warming phase was exacerbated. And so additional 2 degrees Celsius was the extra increase in October 2019. And that one increased the amount of rainfall accumulating in the lakes in East Africa. So Lake Victoria was completely full. So by May 2020, Lake Victoria reached the level of 13.42 meters. And this one threatened infrastructure. And this water, flew down to South Sudan, of course. And Uganda had to actually open the dams. The one Falls Dam was open. And so more water has been coming from there because of that amount of water. The water has never gone down in East Africa. And now it's being tapped up every year. And that's why we are seeing flooding every year now since 2019. And it's because of this condition. So let's go to the next, the first slide. See the first slide. No, it's the first slide. Go up, back.
This was the first slide.
Yes, this is the first slide. And this slide is showing where the flooding is originating in South Sudan. Now you see this is the full Nile basin. This map is map of the full Nile basin. And of course in South Sudan you can see the gray area is the floodplain in South Sudan. And so, water is coming from the east through the Sobat and through the Adar, the Adar, which is on the Nile, on the White Nile. As you can see from the Nile, the Sobat and the Adar. And you see the gray area, those are the floodplains. And you can see the surrounding area is all island. And that's why you see that shaded area is the one that is lower. And then, of course, the main Nile from Uganda. And then the Bargazal River system, you can see all these branches. They are all converging. They are converging in Bentiu. And before Bentiu, you have the Lol River and the Key River. They join, and they are called Key River. And then the Jur River is coming from all the way from Wow, and then they join and they form the Bargazal, and that is the one that is now the subject of dredging now. The local people, they call it the Nam anyway, but the official name is the Bargazal because that's the only length of the river that is called the Bargazal. The other ones are called by their own names, whether it is Kir or Bar Arab or Nol or Yur or Tony or other names. You may have other names. But just, this is just to say that it is because of the increase of rainfall upstream in East Africa, in Congo, in Central African Republic, and even in Darfur, you can see Kiriba is also originating in Darfur. So all this water is converging in, because South Sudan is like a dish. So water is just coming all from the east, from the west, from the north, south, and from the northwest to this one place called the South area. And so if you were to do the dredging, it's not going to really solve the problem. But if the river is blocked, it may not solve the problem too, because historically, this area has always been flooded. And in the 60s, it was flooded. And it was flooded because of the high rainfall in East Africa. The same diapole was also exacerbated by the warming. And that's when the global warming actually started. And so now, the main issue is too much water coming upstream. And that too much water is not being accommodated. So it doesn't matter how much you open it wide. But even if you open it wide and you allow the water to go, what will happen is that down the road, you will also experience drought. That will even be worse than the normal drought, because now you will have no water because you have already drained the water. So this is what I just want to explain about the causes. So the main cause is basically the global warming, the too much rainfall upstream. And if you have other contributing factors, then those ones are minor. Even if the river is shallow now, it's a minor issue and may not be solved. Then if you open it up, the too much water is still coming there, it will not solve it. Also, there are other issues with the Bahr Ghazal and Bahr Jabal. Down there in the middle, before the Bahr Jabal, which is the main Nile, joined with Bahr Ghazal, the Bahr Jabal, when there is too much water coming upstream, always it spills over to the western part, to the Bahr Ghazal basin. And so those areas of Lair are affected by the main Nile. And the water coming from the west also joined there. And then also at Lake No, there is also a backflow when there is too much water. So last year there was a backflow. That's why the water was not flowing. So you can see now, that's why it is important now to really study so that you know the exact problem. And so if you want to open up, then you open up knowing that there is actually a blocking that has happened. But what I know so far is that there is little to do with the blocking, even though there is some blocking. Much is to do with the high level of river, the Bahr Jabal. It is spillover, and there was a backflow at Lake No. And the water level is still very high. So if you open it up, where is that water going to go? It is going to affect the villages upstream, downstream, I mean, because it means more water is going to go. It may not go to the normal channel. It will also overflow, and it's going to affect the villages downstream. So this is what I can say about this question.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Mr. Nhial Tiitmamer. This is very insightful. Actually learning about this and the maps and how the rivers come together. And what you are saying here is that there is actually a need to look at this beyond just like thinking that the dredging will solve it, because it could continue to create some problems down the stream. Because, and I can see that like as all these rivers come together.
It's a problem upstream, because there will be reduction of water down upstream and more water downstream. That will cause more flooding.
Flooding. Thank you very much. Which is Mr. Abraham Awolich. Some of the critics of this project are concerned that there's a hidden agenda behind the dredging of the Nile River. And so, for example, why is Egypt, out of all the countries, potential countries, allies of the South Sudan, could actually help to address this problem? Why is it Egypt that is really being bullish or actually being at the forefront of all of this?
Well, what I could say is that the issue of the dredging of the Nile River, or the Nam River, as they call it, is really a foreign policy priority of Egypt. And I could say in Africa, the only country that has a major foreign policy is Egypt. And the foreign policy is largely about water. Because if you have ever flown to Egypt, you can see that on the east side of the country, it's greener because of the Nile. But the rest of the country is just sand. And so the livelihood of Egypt basically depends on the Nile water. And because there is a standoff with the Ethiopians, Renaissance Dam is going to decrease the volume of water flowing into Egypt. So they anticipate, because they need flooding down in Egypt, because the flooding then brings the fertile soil into the Nile Valley there. And when it recedes, then that becomes the farming site for the Egyptians. And so when it decreases, then the arable land decreases also in Egypt. So one of their methods, one way to try to increase the volume of water flowing north, they had actually proposed 2 canals or 3. So the Jonglei Canal and then the Baragaza River Canal. So basically bypassing, trying to drain Lake Noah and then connecting it north, and then draining the Sed on the Jonglei side and getting the water to flow to the north. These projects were actually developed during the colonial period, when Egypt and England, when Egypt and the Great Britain actually jointly colonized the Sudan. At that time, of course, technology was a challenge, and so they could not do it. So that's why they tried to revive it in the 70s and faced a lot of opposition. And they went ahead anyway, despite the opposition, until the SPLA was able to intervene militarily. Now, so Egypt really is looking for ways to increase the volume of water flowing north. And it doesn't matter what happens to the other side of the Nile Basin, whether they are dry or whatever it is none of their business. They just want water. And so the real challenge is a public policy challenge in South Sudan. What we had hoped our government would do is to convene an expert forum on this issue of flooding, so that they can educate themselves about what is the cause of the flooding, and how long will the flooding continue, and how could it be mitigated. And in another forum I have mentioned, when you are dealing with issues of climate change, the correct term to use is adaptation. You have to look for ways to adapt to the situation. And adaptation obviously means that we are going to get these cyclical situations in the Indian Ocean, as Nhial has mentioned, and therefore floods are likely to come. And so the only way we can mitigate that is to get people to higher grounds at times of flooding. But it doesn't mean that you need to drain the swamp, because you also get droughts. And the frequency of drought was actually higher before 2019. We were getting droughts almost every other year. And what mitigates the droughts in our case is the swamps, the Sed itself. So our cattle, they graze there, we farm in that area, and we fish. Now, if the water is no longer settling in the marshes and in the swamps, and it is flowing north, then it comes the time of drought. What do you do? So that is why we think that the government needs to take time to study this very carefully. Dredging is not a priority at this moment because there is no, it doesn't tell us, first of all, how much water will be flowing and how is that going to address the flooding. And second, there is not enough evidence to tell us whether it's safe for us to do this now, because we have not studied the long-term impact. And there are some hydrological issues that may arise that we don't know now, because basically when you are dredging, you are basically creating a slope. And already that place is sloped, is lower, and it is lower, and now you're going to dig it even a little deeper, so the water will just slope very fast. And you know, the area of Barghazali is what they call the stone, the iron stone, and so it doesn't hold water that much. So if the river is flowing too fast, then you dry up very fast. So these are some of the concerns that we have, and we need appropriate study so that we are convinced that it is a good policy. And maybe dredging is not bad. We don't know. Maybe it's not bad, but you cannot, because rivers are shared. You know, it starts somewhere and it ends somewhere. You cannot say in the middle here that you want to do something about it without considering the impact of that down the road. And so this is why there is an outcry. People live on water. So you temper with the hydrological system and the ecosystem, it affects people. And so time needs to be taken to study so that when we do it, we are absolutely convinced that it's safe. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So hearing from both of you, it looks like, are you actually saying that while dredging itself might not be a bad idea, you know, there needs to be like a comprehensive approach and analysis of this issue, because some of these rivers are also shared with other countries. So for example, you know, you do this, what then happens, you know, because Uganda, if you don't really put into factor what is going on in Uganda and how they are going to approach this, if you don't look at what Congo is. So really there's a need for our government to really take the time and study and do something in a way that is scientific, that wouldn't lead to adverse effects in the long run. So speaking of which, based on publicly available information, the Ministry of Water and Irrigation, or the Minister, Manawa Peter Gatquath, is in support of the dredging project. However, on Wednesday, June 8th, the Minister of Environment and Forestry, Josephine Napon, said that the Nile river dredging project is illegal and that it will not commence until a proper environmental assessment is conducted. So to what extent is this project compliant with the laws of the land and the best global practices, some of which you have already highlighted in your presentation? Nhial, you can begin.
Yeah, thank you very much. So this is an important question. It's an important question because the two institutions of the government have been basically going contrary to each other. And here we are not judging who is right and who is wrong. What I'm going to say here is what I know to be the normal procedure, whether in South Sudan or elsewhere, based on best practices for projects like this. Okay, first of all, in South Sudan, we have institutions. Each institution is established for a particular purpose. And each of them, if I want to use the analogy, that, you know, a ministry like the Ministry of Environment is like the herder. It's like the herder, the peasant or the shepherd. The person who goes to to the pasture to take care of the animals or the cattle. And the other institutions, let's say the Ministry of Water Resources, it's like, it's like the person who milks the cow. In this case, it can be the Ministry of Petroleum, it can be the Ministry of Water Resources. Any ministry that is managing the resources is the person that is milking that cow. For us, when the cow is milked, you put the milk, you gather it, put it into one container, and then the Minister of Finance is going to distribute that. So I think it's understandable when I use this analogy. And when I use this analogy, so the Minister of Environment here is as the head or the shepherd, is saying that don't release the cattle to this direction because there is a hyena here, or there is a restaurant there, you see? And the shepherd is saying, don't release the cattle to that direction. There is danger, then it should not be ignored. That's what I'm trying to say. It does not mean that the Ministry of Water Resources and Irrigation is wrong, because it is its job to milk whatever it is, whether dredging is amounting to milking or not. It's because they are the ones that are supposed to manage the water, conserve the water, they utilize it for irrigation, for ecosystem maintenance and so on and so forth. So now what I'm trying to say is that in South Sudan, we are supposed to do two things: conduct environmental and social impact assessment, which is the responsibility of the Ministry of Environment and Forestry. And the first step for environmental and social impact assessment is what is called screening. All projects are screened to determine whether it is supposed to go through an environmental and social impact assessment, because some projects can be exempted. Projects that have less impacts, they are listed actually. In the proposed environmental bill, there are a series of such projects, and dredging falls among the ones that are supposed to be subjected to environmental and social impact assessment. This is the same case if you use the World Bank standards for the IFC, Environmental Sustainability Framework. Is the same step, screening first. So you determine, when you do the screening, you determine whether the project is going to be against a particular law, whether the project is going to be carried out in a location that is protected, that is ecologically sensitive. And this project is within the third wetland, which is a Ramsar site. It's listed as Ramsar site by the Ramsar Convention on the Wetlands of International Significance. So this is already a red flag already there. And so if you do something like that, it's not about South Sudanese, raising their voice. You are actually going to have implication internationally, because this is when it is a wetland of international significance, it means it is important for humanity. Because this wetland, what it does now is part of the lungs of the earth, because it sequesters the carbon dioxide. It is very important for climate mitigation. Carbon dioxide, of course, is the gas that causes global warming, that is causing all these climatic shocks, drought, and flooding. So the project is also located near a game reserve like the Zerab Reserve, which is also another protected area. It's also close to Shambe, another protected area. And of course, it is located within the protected landscape. The movement between these different, like Mashara, is also a reserve, a game reserve. Mashara is also up the Baragazal, up the Jur, on the Jur river. So all the wildlife, like the elephant, this is the elephant zone. And so when it is dredged and the water level goes down and the torch or the swamps, basically they dry up, it has implication for the wildlife. It has implication for the pastures. It has implication even for farming itself, because the inundation that happens every year also brings with it the fertility of the soil. And so with screening not done, so the ministry said they did not know. That means they did not do the screening. A ministry that is proposing is supposed to notify through a letter, and then the secretary of the ministry proposing is supposed to write to the undersecretary of the Ministry of Environment, or the ministry responsible for the environment. We don't have authority, it should have been the authority, requesting that, notifying that we are going to do a project in this location, and that we are requesting a screening, and such letter will have the description of the full project. And then they will do the screening, they will do a full review. A full review screening involves a full review to see the possible impact. And then so that you can now say, go ahead, it will go through the environmental and social impact assessment. And then the other step will be the scoping, which has also not been done. The scoping in this case determines the geographical scope, the temporal scope, which is the time bound of what you want to look at. The people, the stakeholders that you are going to talk with, the communities, the other institutions that are concerned, the international community. Like now, this place is like listed as a Ramsar site, and it's a proposed UNESCO heritage site too. So you will have to also involve all these bodies. It's not an easy thing. You don't do it in secret. If you do it in secret, it will be even more damaging. And so, yes, it is not in compliance on that basis. It's not in compliance with the process, with the procedures, because the process should have begun with the Ministry of Water Resources and Irrigation, notifying the Ministry of Environment, and Ministry of Environment conducting the screening and the scoping with everybody being involved, and now developing finally the TOR for environmental and social impact assessment to be carried out, and for feasibility studies. So once you have done the environmental and social impact assessment and feasibility studies, you will have the full information now. So you will know the depth of the river now, how much the river has been blocked, how much the river has silted. The feasibility study will give you all these things. With all this information, you will now be able to design. This is the second phase. With the design, you design what you want to, how much, the depth you want to dig. Is it 1 meter? Is it 2 meters? By the way, 1 meter is too much for dredging. If you were to do the dredging, it's too much. It may not be allowed, because already it will be too much depth, and the amount of water that will be flowing when you do that is too much. But at the moment, we don't have any information. We don't have the information about the design, the flow design. So in terms of depth, in terms of width of the channel, in terms of the slope, because you also want to design the slope. Slope is determined based on the morphology of the river and the nature of the soil. So that you will have 1.15, for example, that will be the slope, or it will be 1 to 1. 1 to 1 is like a very steep one, like a straight vertical. 1.3 will be very gentle. This is what is preferred most of the time. But it depends on the kind of the soil type and the geological nature of that place, the rock and everything. And our rivers are alluvial. That means they easily change. That's why you see all this meandering, happening. Is because they go this year, that, and then when there is too much water, you will see they will change to another direction. So in short, the process that is supposed to be, whether nationally or internationally, has not been so far complied with, because maybe they have complied with and we don't know, because nobody has been communicating. But so far, based on the first releases from the Ministry of Water Resources and Irrigation and from the Ministry of Environment, we know the process has not been complied with. And to me, The government has time to put on hold. The government should put on hold this project, should stop any activity with regard to any dredging, and start with studies, pre-feasibility studies first, and then do the feasibility studies and follow the procedures, even the design. The design also should also involve participation also of experts and the members of public, so that we know what is the depth that is going to be dug, to be excavated, what is the slope, what is the width. All these are very important because they determine the amount of water that will be going upstream. We also want to know when the studies are done, whether there is, because we suspect those of us who are familiar with the nature of the river and the flooding that has been happening, we know that much of blocking that is happening is because of the too much water going here from Baral Jebel, and it's blocking the water at Lengno. So, but of course, it has to be verified. Also, much water is going from around Addo, and it's also affecting north of Chambe. And it's also something that has historically been documented, whether it is the flood of 1916 to 1919, there was, because this flood was very high, whether it is the flood of 1960, 61 to 64, or the flood of this year. These are extreme floods. These are extreme floods. And during these extreme floods, there have been spillover into the Baragazal river system, and it complicates the matters around Bintio and other places in the west there. And so we need to be careful to do studies. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Nhial. In the interest of time, I really appreciate how you went into depth about this, and especially the analogy that you gave on how the relationship between the Ministry of Environment and the Ministry of Water and Irrigation Resources should be modeled, in a way that is efficient, because they are essentially doing the same thing but in different ways. And so I think also you also highlighted even the importance of, even if it was scientifically valid that dredging is what needs to be done, you also need to consult with the stakeholders and be able to even sanitize the people that this is the right thing and this is going to be beneficial for them. Hence the need to take this time. So thank you very much for all these critical points. Moving on, Mr. Abraham Awolich, on Tuesday last week, the press secretary in the office of the president, Mr. Atenwaka, said that the office of the president is not aware of the dredging project. And yet, the World Bank has pledged 120 million to support the local communities that are, or that actually might be impacted by this project. And the International Organization for Migration is going to be the implementing agency for this. So how is this actually possible that this project could happen without the knowledge from the office of the president? And yet, with the involvement of the World Bank, which we know is a multilateral organization, and they're working hand in hand with the government, right, of like that country. And yet also the International Organization for Migration. How relevant is that organization to the issue that is at hand right now in being able to really address and work with the population that might be affected?
Well, thank you very much. First of all, on the question of knowledge of the project, it is impossible for a project of such magnitude to be carried out in a country without knowledge of the president. So I don't believe it, and I don't buy it for a minute that the president is not aware. What I know, however, is that the president himself never owns any project, so he would accept you to do something, and when it goes wrong, he will distance himself from that. That has been his way of running the affairs of the country. South Sudan has gotten ever closer to Egypt in the last 3 years. And the president has visited Egypt twice, or even more than that. And the senior government officials flew to Egypt always. on bilateral engagements. Even the national dialogue process, Egypt was somewhat involved. They provided some equipment. So South Sudan is a high priority policy area for Egypt. And they have offered us a lot of scholarships. And we all know that the economists would say there is no free lunch. Why is Egypt doing all of those good things for South Sudan? It's all informed by its foreign policy on which is driven by water. And so I think the president is definitely aware, and he has signed off on this project. But because it is meeting public resistance, that's why he has tried to distance himself. Number two, if the president is unaware of the project, should suspend it. And actually, actually, there is something wrong with that, because how could a state engage in bilateral relationship without the Ministry of Foreign Affairs? And of course, the president is the chief diplomat in any country. So I believe that the president is not telling the people of South Sudan the truth about this project. He should come out and address the issue in a public address and tell us what he knows and what he doesn't know. So people are also having difficulties these days believing what Atanyuak says, given previous situations where he politely came out and made extreme statements that turn out later to be untrue. So, so I think that there is a problem with that, and it goes to tell you the nature of public policy we have in South Sudan, and it goes to tell you also the Artigono. So what I think is happening is that the parties to the revitalized government of national unity are not on the same page. And because the Minister of Water is a member of the SPLM-IO, there is definitely a plan to project the IO as the culprits for championing this water project. And that is probably the angle where the president says he is unaware of the project. But the bottom line is that the people of South Sudan consider the Ministry of Water Resources and the Government of Unity State as part of the government of South Sudan. After all, we are now a centralized system. The governors are appointed by the president, and obviously all major projects that happen in the state are given a go-ahead by the president. So with regard to Egypt, as I have already mentioned, Egypt would want to control the Nile. That is their main objective. They want to control the Nile, and the Nile is their primary occupation. They cannot survive without it. And so if they can increase the volume of water going north and prevent you from doing anything on the Nile, that is their policy preference. Don't do anything, don't touch the water, let it all flow north. And so Egypt is using both threats and bribery of our public officials to try to get hold of South Sudan policy and drive it from there. And then they have been supplying the government with weapons and with munitions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Awolich, for this. Just to wrap it up, I know that the dredging of the Nile is a complex phenomenon that requires a sustainable solution to it, as some of you have already mentioned in your presentation. So what recommendations would you offer to key policymakers and relevant agencies and the South Sudanese citizens in general?
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Gang, for, this is an important question, and there is always an alternative. When you are saying something, whether something should not be done or should be done, there should always be an alternative. And the dredging is being advanced as a tool for flood risk reduction. Unity State is completely devastated by flooding, and the people on the ground, most of them are supporting the dredging. And I know they are supporting it because they are desperate. They don't know the other side, because when you are in the middle of the sea,
Nhial has, okay,
trying to, to come out of that situation, you really don't mind about whatever that comes your way to rescue you. So that's why people are completely desperate. I was in Bentiu in March, and that was in the middle of dry season, and the water was still on the ground. The Baragazal was not flowing, or Baranam. And of course, in this situation, what will come to your mind is flood risk. I mean flood emergency rescue, and not major infrastructure project. Because even if dredging is supposed to solve this problem, it will even take time for water to get back. So it's not a quick solution now. The quick solution is for the government, whether at national level or state level, and the partners, humanitarian agencies. I know a lot of them. Many humanitarian agencies have been doing their part. Even the government institutions have also been trying, especially at the state level. I know they have been trying their best to rescue these people. And what we need is an emergency response, not a major infrastructure project like dredging. Because even if you dredge now, water is not going to get back to the river channel quickly. It will take time for that water to get back. So, relocate people. Talk with the neighbors. I know South Sudanese don't like each other. It seems like we have lost humanity. But if we have humanity, and I know neighbors have already accommodated people, but the government need to be there. The partners need to be there, should be there to intervene. So people should be taken to where they will be safe, to where they can conduct normal livelihood activities at the moment until the flood water recedes. And then we need to do comprehensive studies, do comprehensive analysis of flooding situation across the country, not only in Unity State, but in the whole Baragazal River Basin, in the whole of Barjebel River Basin, in the whole of Soba, in the whole of White Nile. That way, we'll be able to come up with a comprehensive solution to flooding, to see where, at what location are people being affected, and what are the local factors that are exacerbating these flood conditions. We know the main cause is that there is too much water coming from East Africa, from upstream countries, from the west, from the east, and from the south. We know that this is the main source, but there are local factors that are also exacerbating. The low-lying nature of our country is exacerbating this. And the low-lying nature of our country, should be addressed. And the solution is not to open more ways. I think to me, the solution is to control water upstream. Where the water is coming from, that's where we should control the water. We should have dams upstream in Nimili, in Bedan, which is between Nimili and Juba. And it's inside Uganda. South Sudan can actually work together with Uganda to build a dam in Lake Albert, mouth of Lake Albert. And Lake Albert is a good natural site for reservoir because it has a steep bank. So, and you know that dams are not good because they also cause huge environmental damage. So, but if they are properly designed with feasibility studies, with environmental and social impact assessment, and mitigation measures, and you have a right location, you can minimize the damage. And the damage that you will cause upstream may be less than the damage that the water is causing now. So controlling water upstream is very important, and dam will be my first recommendation. And this is a long term. It's a long term. The short term now, what should be done now, if I were to take action now, will be to take people out of water and provide them with relief food and provide mechanism for peaceful coexistence with local communities. I know there is already tension between those displaced from Unity State and those in Ruel. There are also tensions also in Equatoria because some people displaced in Jonglei. We know many people have lost their lives. So we need to be able to come up with solution, and the immediate solution is, rescuing people, relocating them, provide them with a piece of land temporarily, and then the next one will be to build dikes for places where, for example, in Jonglei State, you can relocate people to the east and provide security there in the east. It can happen in Twigis, in Bor County, in Duk, because there are some dry areas upland in the east. You could also do the same thing in other areas. And where people have no place within their original area, they should be relocated by the government to the neighboring communities. And the low-hanging fruit at the moment is the dike. Building dikes in all these basin is very important. It is important because it's less controversial, like dredging. Humanitarian organizations will come in and they will support. Like the dike that was constructed in Bor, Twigis, and Duke County in 2005 by the USA. The USA actually provided the money given to Well Food Program, contracted to GTZ. GTZ contracted that. That dike was 93 kilometers long. And in fact, it worked for like more than 10 years without, issues of flooding. It's not that there was no flooding. It was because that dike was very effective. It was a modern dike, but it has not been maintained. That's why it was overcome recently. So we need a measure. This dike can be extended all the way to Pangak, to Fiji. We also need similar one in the western part of the country, in the Bargazal Basin, and along the edges of the Barajabal in the west, to protect those communities in those parts. In March, when I flew from Rumbek to Rukona, and after we left Rumbek going north, it was all water in March during the dry season. It was all over the place, water, until we reached the airport, and the airstrip is basically surrounded by water. So, a dike will actually be helpful as a low-hanging fruit for now because it's less controversial. And then, of course, doing studies for all proposed solutions is very important so that we have a comprehensive solution to this problem. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Nhial, for all these insightful multi-pronged approaches to this problem. So in the short term, you are suggesting that the government needs to be able to help, and people who are immediately impacted, try to help them find like some places to relocate, even though it's controversial, as you have explained, because of sometimes animosities within our communities. But if properly done, it's not impossible to relocate people in the short term. And then also in the short term, you can build dikes that can actually immediately help control this. while you do the long-term feasibility and then also consider major projects like the dam. So thank you very much for that. Mr. Awolich, the question was, wrapping it up here is that, the dredging of the Nam River is a complex phenomenon that requires sustainable solutions. And so what recommendations would you offer to key policymakers and relevant agencies and even the citizens of South Sudan?
Well, thank you very much. What I can recommend is a coherent government policy on matters related to water and rivers. The policy should not be disjointed, such that a section of South Sudanese community would come up with their own solution. It has to be a comprehensive solution that considers the entire length of the SED. And so that is one. Number two, South Sudanese at the moment, given the previous relationship of Egypt trying to dig the Jonglei Canal, South Sudanese people cannot trust Egypt at the moment. So if South Sudan is looking for any solution to the flooding, we have other countries that do not have interest, that are not interested in draining the Nile, including the Netherlands. They know how to control water, and there are many other countries. And so if South Sudan is looking for a solution to the floods, really, the relationship should be a short-term solution, as Nhial mentioned, with dikes. A short-term solution should be building dikes and moving people out of the lowlands to the highlands. And the reason people live in the flooding areas is because that's, when there is no flood, that is the right place to be, because you can farm and you can graze your animals without a problem. And so flooding is a short-term situation that may last for 5 to 7 years, but its impact could go for forever if the water is no longer there. So I suggest that the government should really have a very strong, coherent policy on the Nile. And it is not a policy that can be managed by the Ministry of Waters or the Ministry of Environment. It is a national policy issue. Nile is our base, so the entire population of South Sudan live on the Nile basin. And so that is our survival, just like it is for Egypt. And so we cannot have a disjointed policy on this. It should be a very strong policy, because we have our two neighbors in the north, Sudan and Egypt, claiming the ownership of the Nile. And we sit in the middle of that Nile basin, which is, as Nhial showed, which is started way in East Africa. And it involves Rwanda and Uganda and other countries. So really, we need a coherent, highly informed policy managed at the national level, not by local people. And secondly, as I have mentioned, we need international experts and international people who have developed expertise in water management, such as the Netherlands, to give us the right tools and the right equipment to manage excess water that we get. And so I think those are my recommendations. And of course, whenever you are carrying out such a policy, it should be remembered that the Nile affects many communities, starting in Congo Western Equatoria, all the way to the whole of Barghazal when you are talking on the West Nile side of the river. Now, on the east side, we should know that it affects the entire society there, starting in central and eastern Equatoria, all the way to Jonglei and Upper Nile. So you cannot sit somewhere and say, okay, this I'm going to do this in my part of the river. No, it is a shared resource, and it needs a comprehensive approach, and it needs consultation and explanation. The local people maybe who are drowning now, their urgent situation now is to get out of the water. So if anybody comes and say, listen, I'm going to drain this water and you will be free from the flood, they will say, please do it. But do they have enough information to make that decision in terms of 10 years, 100 years from now, what will happen? So we really need to think about Nile system and the set as a natural resource, and it therefore needs a coordinated, centralized national policy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Awolich and Nhial Tiitmamer, for this conversation today. On behalf of the Sawa Sawa Network and its audience, I would like to thank you for these insightful discussions, and we hope to have more in the future to really help illuminate some of the factors around this debate to help the people have a better understanding of this critical national domestic policy issue, the dredging of the Nile at large, starting with the Nile River. To our audience, please stay tuned and engage with the Sawa Sawa Network on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and our website, www.sawasawanetwork.org. Thank you very much, and see you next time.